International African Arts Festival is back in 2025 at Commodore Barry Park in Brooklyn, New York. The 54th annual IAAF will be held from Friday, July 4th through Sunday, July 6th, from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., rain or shine. The festival features world-renowned performers and vendors from around the world. Commodore Barry Park, aka City Park in Brooklyn, is located in downtown Brooklyn at Navy Streets, Park and Flushing Avenue.
Greetings, my name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition is a special as we welcome someone who's no stranger, but also someone who has been in the struggle for many years. I'm none other than Zayid Muhammad. Let me tell you who he is. Well, he's a radical activist, profile of over 40 years. He's a proud cub of the Black Panther Party and founding press officer of New York's Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. He recently was featured in a critically acclaimed Netflix documentary, Who Killed Malcolm X? He is an organizer for the Newark Communities for Accountable Policing. He's also a producer of a radio program called All Politics Are Local, a weekly hip hop talk radio show formerly based in Rutgers University in Newark. Welcome to the Cultural Caravan, Brother Zay.
Welcome back, dear Queen Mother Louise. Welcome back.
So I want to say to you, there's been a lot I can say, but I want your work to speaks volumes, okay, in terms of what you've been doing. You're really a warrior, basically been out here moving. I know you've been traveling from Newark or from New Jersey to New York and other places around the globe for many years, really on the thing. I know Malcolm X and his legacy has been a very important part of your life. I wanted to start by you explaining to the audience, what is it about Malcolm X and how did you find out or become connected to the Malcolm X legacy?
Let me put it this way. As a Black man in America and all of the dangers that entails, Malcolm has been, continues to be, has always been a lifeline for Black men, among all of the other things that he is, right? And I needed a lifeline when I was in the streets, involved in some nefarious activity that certainly could have cut my life short or consumed much of my life in the prison system. I stole literally his autobiography in a drug transaction in 1977, and I would dare say it saved my life and certainly saved me from going to prison over foolishness. So he's been a lifeline and continues to be a lifeline for Black men of all ages. And that's one of the, and it's actually a space that I'm actually, in terms of my community work and my professional work, trying to bring him back to, and we can come back to that whole thing. By virtue of cleaning my own act up, if you will, if I was able to actually ultimately get some kind of education, my activism really took off during the student movement, the Black college student movement, back in the late 70s, early 80s, and just progressed from there.
That just giving us an overview. But many people have heard about Malcolm, have their own thoughts about who he was or who he is. Certainly, he's respected for his ability to transcend circumstances and to rise above and become a modern day saint or someone who's had a real journey. He came from one point and he rose throughout. And his rising is what we honor at this point. The man he became, not what he may have started off, but he rose above that. So looking at his 100th anniversary, okay, and I know you've done things on an annual basis. You've been part of various activities to honor Malcolm all the way up to this point. So I just want to first start off with what are some of the ways that you and others have annually honored Malcolm, particularly on his birth date as well as on the day of his transition. What are some of the things that have been done to honor him over the years?
First, I want to pick up on the language that you just used because it's important. That he is indeed a transcendent figure in our history and in our struggle. That he is a beacon of personal and political transformation. That he has been all of that. And we only had him for 39 years. He lived and he crammed so much in those 39 brief years that we had him. And in spite of every single obstacle and misfortune that he faced up until his dying moment, the integrity of who he was, the drive he possessed, right? And just the amazing character, the Iwa Pele, as we would say in Ifa, the spiritual tradition of our ancestors was just so stellar that he has cut through all of those things that tried to hold him back and tried to mislead many about who he was, what he did, and the importance of his impact. I'd also say, on the way to answering your question, that his centennial couldn't come at a better time. Right, this is
Mm,
a dark time in this country's history, right? And whenever there's darkness, what's the key to survival? It's light, and he has always been a light that our people can follow. And to be sure, I would dare say that the light of his legacy and an example is going to be key to helping our people, particularly our young people, navigate this very tricky, dark, and backwards political terrain that we're in at this moment. Um, this year will also has already marked the 60th anniversary of his assassination. May 19th is his centennial. It's the 60th anniversary of our annual pilgrimage to his gravesite. This year also marks the 60th anniversary of the release of his narrative, albeit challenges that it faced. That was the autobiography of Malcolm X, the book that I stole that literally saved my life back in 1977. So all of those, moments give us opportunity to really lift up and amplify his legacy and what it means. Already, we can say that there's been some five scholarly conferences that took place on or around the assassination. Two in Michigan, he was Detroit Red, one in Michigan State and one in Wayne State. There was an incredible conversation that I've been trying to track down of a young scholar that looked at Colombia's Afro-Colombian population, right, and their relationship to our Black consciousness movement here, and how it was inspired by Malcolm. And of course, the Shabazz Center, well, formerly the Audubon Ballroom where he was taken, is now the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Education Center, right? That is now managed by Malcolm's third daughter, Ilyasa Shabazz. And every February 21st and May 19th, that becomes a place to go for important gatherings to uplift Malcolm's memory, legacy, and how it is relevant to these days. So all of those things, and by virtue of the importance of this incredible milestone, we see things popping up all over the country, literally all over the world, to amplify Malcolm's legacy. So that's just the beginning
mhm.
of an intro. Our organization was started, and I should say that Malcolm is one of the fathers of what we call New African Independence, uh, yeah, and that brand of particular uh, African nationalism was started by the late great Herman Ferguson. Herman Ferguson was in the OAAU with Malcolm, as well. Some incredible folks who were just really beginning to come together as he was trying to figure out how to lay the groundwork for the building out of the OAAU. Herman was very much a part of the battle for control of our schools in Brooklyn back in the late 60s. He was a radical educator, right? And by virtue of him really trying to continue to do some of the things that Malcolm would have us do, he became a very serious target for the COINTELPRO operations of that time. Um, After Malcolm's death, he put together the Jamaican Rifle and Pistol Club, that literally trained men and women of all ages and sizes in armed self-defense, right? And some of the young men and women who came through that formation found themselves forming in what would become one of the most talked about in impactful chapters of the Black Panther Party, the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party. But by virtue of all that, he had to go into exile. And he was in exile for over 20 years in Guyana, played a role in the development of Guyana's military defense and its educational infrastructure, but tried to come back in the late 80s, particularly 1989, to clear his name. And of course, he knew he would face the real possibility of doing jail time, and he did. He faced that. The late great Bruce Wright, famous judge of Harlem law, found himself having that case in his courtroom, and Bruce did what Judge Wright was famous for doing. He cut the elder loose. As soon as that happened, Baba Herman pulled together those of his comrades from the OAAU that he had at his disposal, as well as some of us who were serious in our own right as activists of our particular generation, to form what became the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. Yuri Kuchiyama, one of the most saluted international beacons of international solidarity, who was also huge to Harlem's history. Gene Reynolds, Butch Gladstone, Earl Grant, an unforgotten top-notch soldier who was also an electrical engineer who gave us a very important moment of Malcolm. He literally created a listening device and taped the FBI trying to co-opt and bribe Malcolm. And Gil Noble and the late great Dr. John Henry Clark documented that particular moment. So these were some of the kind of folks that came together that were in the OAAU, that were the elders that grounded what became the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. We also had great radical scholar and educator Sam Anderson, who was in the Black Panther Party and was best known for the Black Holocaust for Beginners. Right, we had our early meetings at the Center for Constitutional Rights because we had the great Joan Gibbs, who we just lost recently, who's a new ancestor, a people's lawyer who did a whole lot of work on our political prisoners and was Baba Herman's lawyer and had his COINTELPRO papers that were key in trying to get him out of the system. And they had people like me, whatever that was worth. I had ran a series of teachings many years ago called the Malcolm X Ancestral Memory Project in Newark and in New York City. And his wife, while he was still inside, Ialua Ferguson, recruited me to be a part of the beginning of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. So in our early days, we would do forums on the 21st and on May 19th. But it was in May of 1994 when we became a part of the annual pilgrimage to the gravesite. And I have to stop and really just salute two incredible human beings for that. Ella Little Collins, Malcolm's big sister, Boston based, and was a figure in Boston's Black Power community in her own right, independent businesswoman in real estate. Ella, who conceptualized what became the pilgrimage and the gravesite ceremony to honor Malcolm, because this year is also the centennial of Patrice Lumumba. At the top of the decade, Patrice Lumumba was not only assassinated, but his body was dismembered and put in a vat of acid because his killers understood that African people venerate their ancestors. So they didn't want to leave any stone unturned to have a place where Patrice Lumumba could be honored and venerated the way we do. And Sister Ella understood that on her own and came up with this idea for this pilgrimage that Professor James Small, a warrior scholar who was very key in bringing Black studies to the City College of New York and Harlem by virtue of an armed takeover that he did when he was a young man. It's all Malcolm's energy, right? Ella and tasked that young man, and then he was only in about 18 years old with that responsibility. He has honored that every year for 60 years. We had the honor of making the ceremony grow, and continuing to build out its national appreciation. We were important in helping draw folks from as far away as Boston and as far away as Houston, DC, Georgia. We've had folks come from all over the years to participate in the annual pilgrimage to the gravesite. That same year, my comrades from the December 12th movement, we also started what we call what is now the commercial moment of silence. We started shutting down 125th Street in Harlem for most of the day to make the business community of Harlem respect the principle of community self-determination. And you've been in the streets with us, and we've done that, Sister Louise. You can bear witness to this personally, right? Why that's important. So this is year 36 that we've done that. Of
Mhm.
course,
Now, may I ask,
yeah.
how many people would you say over the years have come and did the pilgrimage? How many people would you estimate?
You gonna ask me a math question?
Es- Estimate. Um,
I couldn't put a number on anything like that, but I can say that there is not anyone that I have encountered in the years that I've been involved that has not been heavily impacted by the weight of what it is that we did and are doing. One of the things that I was particularly proud to be able to do. So in the middle of that, for a while, I also ran the new Black Panther Party in this area. And in 2000, my troops were given the responsibility for being the honor guard of the ceremony. And I know that the young men and women that were with me uh, still talk about that to this very day, right? And they're just and they were already had them in the streets of New York and Philadelphia and Jersey doing other stuff already. But that was something that everybody once they bit that sweet banana of liberation and in honoring this particular ancestor, it became something that they really had to do, take stock of, appreciate, and share. So I can't give you a quantitative number, but I can definitely give you a qualitative number.
mhm.
Last year, I mentioned earlier that I work in community-based violence intervention. We have a young scholar, younger than us, Akil Kalfani out of Essex County College, who now runs a bus to the gravesite. I was able to get some of the two of the mentoring programs that came out of our community-based violence intervention network in Newark on that bus. And we coordinated with some of those young men, these young brothers who were quote, at risk, that language that they used to use for us in the school system, uh, found themselves being entreated to being a part of the ceremony as the men in white. Folks not understanding what I'm talking about, the circle begins with the displaying of the flag over Malcolm's gravesite, the chair of the leader, right? And there's in the Sudanese white of what Islam looked like in the late 50s, early 60s when Malcolm went to the Sudan. Malcolm was really impressed by that. We have that component that's a part of that particular ceremony, and people, young men, are drafted every year, sometimes very spontaneously even, to be a part of that ceremony to make it even more personal. So you have this long stretch from what we started doing in the early 90s in terms of what we do to a whole new generation getting ready to come into this
Mhm.
mix as we had
Mhm.
the last year has been really impactful. And we're talking about over uh, folks' lifespan.
I just want to just kind of talk as you've talked about the ceremony and some of the traditions that have been established over the 60 odd years of this process of honoring this distinguished ancestor. Um, Now, talk to me about some of the things that you're planning, some of the activities that have been planned for this year, 2025, to honor the 100th anniversary? Well, what things have already taken place, as well as those things to continue to take place over the
Well,
next?
let's backtrack for a second because there's no way I'm going to have this conversation and not acknowledge the East, not acknowledge the African Street Festival, and not acknowledge the African Poetry Theater where you and I ultimately hooked up at, right? All of those were the cultural expressions, right? Malcolm's call for the liberation of the African personality, right? So all of that is there, right? So we want to lift and include all of that, right? There's already, to your question, there's been like already 5 scholarly conferences that have taken place this year already. New School, Wayne State, University of Michigan, Ohio State, um, Monterey, University of California in Monterey, already, right? The UN, the United Nations, where Malcolm was trying to get us to on the shoulders of the work of the great Paul Robeson and William Patterson from early 1950s, had a beautiful exhibit that was crafted by the First Lady of Turkey. Turkey has a national street, a national boulevard named after Malcolm, the street on which the U.S. Embassy sits. And they did that too as an act of self determination, right? The U.S. was not terribly happy or excited to have the embassy sitting on what's now Malcolm X Embassy in Turkey. But there was an exhibit there called Echoes, um, reclaiming and unveiling the legacy of Malcolm X. And she was a great uh, Turkish feminist organizer, Sula Yüksel Senler. Uh, at the United Nations. It's already ended. It only lasted for about a week and 10 days. We couldn't even get there in time to see it before it went down. But it was an incredible expression of just how Malcolm is appreciated, not just in our hoods and in our hearts, but people fighting for self-determination and claiming the right to self-determination all over the globe.
What is it about El Hajj Malik Shabazz memory, legacy, that has endured over these years? What is it about his story that continues to really talk about the human story? Because he fought for human rights.
That's right.
So what would you say the impact of El Hajj Malik Shabazz on our people and the world?
He was. I like to refer to him as a paradigm shifter, right? I used to tell students when I used to do lectures at universities that when you talk about the 1960s, the so-called movement as we knew it then, young people went into the 1960s children of Martin Luther King. They came out of the 1960s children of Malcolm X. He definitely represented the fundamental paradigm shift in that movement that can't be overlooked and underappreciated. Um, the civil rights movement was something that was constructed from the beginning with controls on it, with external controls, meaning being financed by philanthropy that's outside of our community. There's always been a limitation on how far that can go. Malcolm, child of Garveyites, right, coming out of the Nation of Islam, two stalwart nationalist expressions, was not going to be in a situation where he or they would ever be co-opted by those kind of forces because we did for ourselves, right? And that was one of the, he was a huge beacon for inspiring our people to do for ourselves. I think before we had this conversation, I mentioned just several days ago was the anniversary of his Ballad of the Bullet, right? Where he builds on his united front call that comes out of the message to the grassroots, lays out what African nationalism looks like for the Black liberation movement, independent control of our politics, our economy, and our culture without apology, right? And looking forward to international Pan-African engagement of claiming our human rights and charging the United States government with genocide. All that wrapped up in that conversation, and he stayed true to that. And that is something basic for our people to go at any time at any time. Every people has the right to self-determination, to control our own community, control our own institutions, and be unapologetic about that. And that's going to be something very important to do because a lot of us have come to depend on government and philanthropic coffers that are now being slashed away by someone who doesn't care at all about the image of the U.S. and liberal pretensions of getting along, going along, and getting along. And we're really going to have to do for ourselves like we haven't done in a long time. Malcolm will show you how.
Well, as we close, I just want to say I appreciate the information. I think the audience appreciates the passion, the commitment, and the to the preserving the life, the legacy of El Hajj Malik Shabazz. And if there's anyone who wants to find out more about the work you're doing, is there a phone number or a website?
We have a very international Facebook page, Malcolm X Commemoration Committee on Facebook. Spell it all out, no abbreviations, right? We have a very international Facebook page. We have something that we do online every fourth Sunday this year called Revolutionary Fourth Sunday. Our next virtual conversation will be on the 27th of April, which is the anniversary of the police attacking the LA mosque back in '62 and killing Ronald Stokes and putting Malcolm on the national spotlight in terms of police brutality in a way that was also very unique to his legacy. And we will be doing more in Newark and in New York this year, all year round. We'll be doing a series of book signings in Newark at the Source of Knowledge bookstore called Books for Malcolm, Booking for Malcolm. And of course, you know, the 19th is right around the corner. We're getting our buses together. Buses are coming in from everywhere to participate in the graveside, and we will be shutting down 125th Street for the 36th year in a row without.
Is there a phone number if people are interested in getting on the bus?
973-202-0745, 973-202-0745. And I'll direct you to where you
Gotcha.
need to plug in depending on where you're at and what you need.
Well, I just want to say I thank you so much, Brother Zayid, for your time, and we appreciate what you shared, and we look forward to having you back as we continue to celebrate the life and the legacy of Malcolm at 100. Thank you.
X's in Malcolm is the answer. Thank you, my queen. Thank you.